My husband chose to ambush me on a Thursday evening in October, 4 hours after my Southwest flight landed at Austin Bergstrom. He had his mother standing beside him on the front porch of our house in Cedar Park. She was wearing her powder blue blazer, holding a paper coffee cup like she was waiting for a city bus she'd already purchased a first-class ticket for. My husband had his arms crossed, and a manila envelope in his right hand, and the expression of a man who had spent the better part of a week rehearsing what he was about to say. I rolled my carry-on up the driveway. The October air smelled like cedar and dried grass and the neighbor's fireplace. I noticed my husband didn't say hello. "I filed this morning," he said and handed me the envelope. I looked down at the Williamson County Court stamp on the corner, petition for dissolution of marriage. I stood there for a moment, just reading the words. "There's a restraining order application attached," he continued. His voice was controlled in the specific way of someone who has worked at it. "You have 48 hours to retrieve your personal belongings. The house is mine. It was purchased with company equity proceeds, and I've had that documented and certified. Our joint accounts were restructured this week. Your name has been removed from all of them." He paused. He had clearly been looking forward to this part. "As for Vault Edge, you have no legal claim, no employment agreement, no equity schedule. You never had a formal role. Tiffany's attorneys reviewed every filing. You contributed nothing of legal value to that company." My mother-in-law took one step forward. She was the kind of woman who had spent 63 years perfecting the art of the quiet condescension, the one that hides itself inside the shape of a compliment. She looked me up and down the way someone looks at furniture they've decided is no longer in fashion. "You were a good wife," she said. In her mouth it wasn't a compliment, but Craig is at a different place in his life now. He needs a partner who understands his world, someone who can move at his pace. She adjusted the coffee cup in her hand. "You've been, how do I put this, decorative. And decorative has its moment. That moment has passed." I thought about the last 4 years. I thought about the charity gala where she introduced me to her friends as Craig's wife. She used to do something with computers. I thought about the Thanksgiving where she told her sister, in the kitchen, loudly enough that I could hear it from the hallway, that she'd always hoped Craig would end up with someone with more ambition. I thought about every family dinner where she handed me the check with a little laugh and said, "You're the numbers person," and then watched me cover it while my husband looked at the ceiling. I thought about all of that. And then I smiled. Not a nervous smile, not a polite one, the kind that comes from somewhere deeper in your chest than you expect. My husband's composed expression fractured for half a second before he rebuilt it. "What on earth is there to smile about?" he said. "I was thinking about the patent," I said. I put the envelope down on top of my suitcase. I unzipped my tote bag, the practical one, the dark canvas one my mother-in-law had once called aggressively practical at a family brunch, and I had filed that comment away the same way I file everything, and I pulled out a single document. United States Patent and Trademark Office letterhead, certificate of patent registration, my name, my social security number, my prior professional history listed as the basis for conventorship, the Zero Trust Adaptive Authentication Framework, the algorithm that ran the entire back end of Vault Edge's platform product, the core IP that Meridian was paying $15 million to acquire. I held it up. "The Meridian acquisition," I said, "the deal closing in 3 weeks. The technology they're buying doesn't belong to you, it belongs to me. It has belonged to me for 11 months. I filed the patent application 18 months ago and the certification came through in April." I watched his face. Vault Edge Acquisition Prospectus represents this framework as wholly owned, unencumbered proprietary technology. That is a material misrepresentation in a securities transaction, which is a federal problem. Before I go any further, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from today. And if you've ever had to stand completely still while holding the thing that changes everything, hit that like button. Because this is that kind of story. My name is Audrey. I'm 37 years old and I spent 11 years as a senior cybersecurity analyst before I spent 4 years being what my mother-in-law called decorative. I did network architecture, penetration testing, vulnerability assessment. I was good at it in a way that got me invited to give the keynote address at the Cyberbridge Summit in San Francisco 2 days before my husband decided to hand me divorce papers on my own porch. I was good at it in a way that had led me, during the chaotic first year of my husband's startup, to sit in our second bedroom and design. On a whiteboard, in 2 sessions, with a cup of coffee going cold on the desk beside me, a zero-trust adaptive authentication framework that would become the structural foundation of a company he now valued at $15 million. I never asked for a formal role. I never asked for an equity stake. I trusted that what was ours was ours. That trust was, as it turned out, the most expensive mistake I'd made in 11 years of careful professional decisions. The exact moment I stopped trusting was a Tuesday night in February 2 years ago. I was at the kitchen table at 11 in the evening, going through household expenses the way I always did. Old habits, I could never shake the need to follow a balance sheet, and I found a charge on our shared Visa card. The Line Hotel, downtown Austin. 2 nights. The dates corresponded exactly to a weekend my husband had told me he was in Dallas for an investor pitch. I know how people hide things. I spent 11 years tracking the way malicious actors move through networks, covering trails, misdirecting attention, burying evidence in plain sight. People always think they're more subtle than they are. They're not. They just depend on no one looking closely. I looked. I did not confront him. Confronting is for people who want to be believed in the moment, and I was not going to build anything on that. I opened an encrypted external drive, I created a folder, and I started working. For 2 years, I tracked transactions, flagged anomalies, cross-referenced dates. I followed the restructuring of Vault Edge's equity table through 3 separate sets of amended corporate filings. I watched my name get quietly and methodically removed from every document that might have given me legal standing. My husband was meticulous about it. I will give him that. But meticulousness is only a protection if the other person isn't also meticulous. 18 months ago, I had a consultation with an IP attorney I found through a former colleague and paid for in cash. 6 weeks later, I filed a patent application for the Zero Trust Adaptive Authentication Framework, citing my prior professional history and the archived email records from year 1 of Vault Edge's development, records that were still sitting in my personal inbox, timestamped and intact, because he had removed me from the company's systems, but had not thought to ask me to delete my own history. He had taken me off every document he could find. He had not thought to remove me from my own work. Standing on the porch in Cedar Park, my husband was staring at the USPTO certificate, with the expression of a man watching the floor of a room he thought was solid begin to flex under his feet. "That's not yours," he said. The word came out slowly, like he was testing whether saying it would make it true. "The patent office disagrees," I said. My mother-in-law reached forward and took the document from my hand. She read it twice. I watched her eyes move from dismissive to calculating, the same progression I had seen them make at family dinners when the conversation turned to money. "We will challenge it," she said. "We have IP litigation attorneys on retainer, we have resources. You have," she looked at me with something close to pity, "a car, a personal checking account. What's in it right now, honestly?" "Enough to have retained my own counsel 3 weeks ago," I said. The sound of a car door answered her before I could add anything else. A silver Audi Q5 pulled to the curb. The woman who stepped out was wearing a charcoal blazer, carrying a litigation bag, and had the particular posture of someone who has spent years being underestimated by precisely the people who were about to need her most. She had one AirPod in her left ear, and she walked up the driveway with the brisk, unhurried stride of someone who had somewhere very specific to be. My husband's younger sister. She was 3 years younger than him, and their mother had a long habit of overlooking her at family gatherings. She hadn't made the right kind of noise on her way to becoming one of the sharper IP litigators working in Central Texas. At family dinners, she was the quiet one, the one their mother mentioned last in the update she gave to relatives, the one who had learned early that being underestimated was a resource you could spend carefully. She and I had grown close over 4 years the way women grow close when they're navigating the same difficult room with different armor on. 3 weeks ago, a restructuring filing crossed her desk through a professional contact, and she recognized the company name. She called me the same night she saw it. She walked straight past her brother and her mother without looking at either of them. She stopped next to me, set her bag on the porch railing, and pulled out a bound document with a blue cover. "Good evening." Her voice had the even, unhurried authority of someone who has argued in front of judges and knows that volume is not the same thing as force. "I'm here as Audrey's legal counsel." She handed the document to my husband. You've been served with an emergency motion to halt the Meridian acquisition pending resolution of the IP dispute. I filed it at 4:45 this afternoon. Judge Hollister signed the temporary injunction at 5:02. Meridian's legal team was notified at 5:15. The acquisition is paused. My husband turned pages with hands that were not quite steady. You cannot do this, he said. You're my sister, that's a conflict of interest. I'll report you to the bar by morning. She looked at him with the patience of someone who has been waiting a long time for this particular conversation. You have never been my client, she said simply. Not once. You can report me on Tuesday. My mother-in-law turned on her daughter with the specific fury of a woman who has confused someone's silence with submission. Her voice went low. After everything I have done for you, she said, I paid for your education, I put your name in front of people who mattered when you were nobody. I defended you at this family's table when your father said. You paid for 1 year of law school, my sister-in-law said. Her voice had gotten quieter, which made it more dangerous. 1 year, and then you told me the rest was building character, and you stopped the checks. I took out loans. I worked nights at a firm where I made copies and answered phones. I passed the bar without a celebration dinner, because you and Dad were in Scottsdale that weekend. She paused. And you told me, at Audrey's rehearsal dinner, that I should be grateful she was bringing some much-needed stability to the family since I clearly hadn't managed it myself. She looked at her mother steadily. I've been waiting a long time to be useful in this particular way. My mother-in-law sat down on the porch steps. My husband was still running calculations. I could always see it, that look he got behind his eyes when he was searching for the remaining play, the angle that still worked. The injunction is temporary, he said finally. Even with the patent dispute, you can't resolve this in 3 weeks. Meridian's legal team will push back, the acquisition will proceed. 6 days ago, I said, I filed a voluntary disclosure with the Securities and Exchange Commission. His calculation stopped completely. VaultEdge Acquisition Prospectus represents the authentication framework as unencumbered, wholly owned proprietary technology, I said. It does not disclose a pending patent dispute. Representing contested IP as unencumbered in a material securities transaction is fraud. I let the words sit in the October air for a moment. I submitted the disclosure with full supporting documentation. I also included the email chain confirming you received the USPTO notification 11 months ago. The email was marked as read 8 minutes after it was delivered to your company inbox, and chose not to disclose it to Meridian. He was very still. You can argue you didn't read it, I said. Network access logs don't care about your intentions, they care about what happened. A gray sedan pulled up to the curb. 2 men in dark windbreakers stepped out. They had the practiced efficiency of people who have done this many times, and feel no need to make theater of it. SEC Enforcement Division. My mother-in-law pressed her hand flat against her sternum. The lead agent introduced himself, produced his credentials, and explained in a completely professional and entirely effectless way that they had a warrant to seize relevant devices and documentation, and that my husband was under formal investigation for securities fraud and material misrepresentation in connection with a pending acquisition. My husband looked at me. He looked at me the way a person looks at a map when they realize they have been reading it upside down for a very long time. You were in this house, he said. His voice had no heat left in it, just a hollowed-out quality like a room with the furniture removed. 4 years in this house, and you were. Watching you build a case against me, I said, so I built one back. The agents were quiet and systematic. They moved through the house the way professionals do, purposeful, unflashy, complete. My mother-in-law sat on the porch steps and said nothing for a long time. Then she said, to no particular point in the distance, I don't understand how this happened. My sister-in-law answered her without looking up from the document she was reviewing. It happened because you both decided she didn't count, she said. You made that decision every year for 4 years and you thought it was cleverness, it wasn't. Tiffany arrived at 6:47 in a white Tesla with the VaultEdge logo on the rear window, because she had been trying to reach my husband for an hour and was not getting answers. She got out of the car. She looked at the sedan, the agents moving through the house, my sister-in-law standing next to me on the lawn. She was a precise and careful person. I had gathered that much from 2 years of watching her professional footprint, and I could see her processing the scene with the focused attention of someone taking rapid inventory of her own exposure. My husband turned to look at her, and I watched something in him go completely exhausted. The performance dropped. He just looked tired in a way I hadn't seen before. "You told me the IP was clean," she said. "Not an accusation yet, a request for information. I told you it was handled. You showed me a co-inventor waiver with her signature. You told me it had been executed and notarized." Her voice was careful and even. "Craig personally represented to Marine's board that the core IP was unencumbered. I signed acquisition representations. I am on the hook for those representations." She stopped. "Did you forge her signature on that document?" Silence. She said it again one more time the same way. My sister-in-law stepped forward and handed the lead SEC agent a copy of the forged waiver without a word. "We have a notarized signature exemplar from the same time period for comparison," she said. "We also have home security footage showing she was not in the building the day the document was supposedly executed." Tiffany looked at my husband for a long moment. Then she turned to the lead agent and said, very quietly, that she would like to speak with the SEC's counsel voluntarily that evening, and that she had relevant information about what she had and had not been told about the company's IP status. She cooperated fully. She had been told what she'd been told. She had trusted what she'd been shown. In a different version of this story, I might feel more about that. In this one, I noted it and moved on. The acquisition collapsed. The patent stayed in my name. The securities fraud charges moved quickly, the way they tend to when someone hands investigators a clean indexed file that already has the timeline mapped. My husband was charged federally. My mother-in-law was not charged criminally, but the civil filing my sister-in-law attached to the proceeding, targeting her as a party who had prior knowledge of the intent to restructure assets in a way designed to defraud a spouse, resulted in a judgment that traveled quietly through the local business community. Her name was removed from 2 charity boards and a neighborhood development committee in the weeks that followed. I did not remark on this. I filed it the same way I file everything else. 6 weeks after that evening on the Cedar Park porch, I signed an operating agreement in a co-working space off South Congress. The company was called Watchpoint Security Consulting. I had been keeping the name in the back of my mind for 2 years, against the possibility that I would eventually have room to use it. My sister-in-law is listed as general counsel. We had 4 client inquiries before the website was finished. Every one of them was a woman in the middle of a complicated legal situation who needed someone to show her what her own finances actually looked like underneath what she had been told. We find what has been hidden, we trace what has been moved, we document the shape of the lies, and we hand the package to the people who can use it. I know how to do this because I did it for 2 years at my own kitchen table at 11 o'clock at night, with an encrypted drive and the professional skills that had been described to me, repeatedly and in front of other people, as no longer relevant to my life. There is a thing that people like my husband count on. They count on you performing the emotion they've scripted for you. They count on the tears, the begging, the falling apart on the welcome mat. They have planned for that version of you. They have not planned for the version of you that spent 2 years building a case. Stay quiet, stay accurate, let them show you exactly who they are. And then, when the time is right, pull out the document. Drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from today. Share this with someone who's fighting a quiet battle of their own. And subscribe to Wolf Revenge, because this is only the beginning.